Hey guys, it's Tahira, and today I'm doing my worst books of the year video. So this year I ended up reading, actually like it's still December, so I still am gonna read more books, but my goal was 35 books for the year, and I think I'm gonna hit that because so far I've read 34. But I really didn't think I would have enough to talk about, like have a whole video dedicated to worst books of the year, but actually like I'm talking about 7 books today, which is quite a big chunk of those 34 books that I've read already. So I feel like, I don't know how much, I feel like my reading year wasn't as great as I wanted it to be. There was a lot of 2 stars for me, which I'm going to be talking about for my worst books of the year video. But yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and start talking about these books. I also really hope that the camera lighting, like the focus is on me and not on the lights behind me, because these are the first time I'm like turning them on in a video. I really hope that everything works out. Anyways, I just have to preface this by saying these are the worst books for me. I am by no means saying that these are like all objectively bad books. I can recognize that some of these are objectively good, but for me, they just either didn't land as well as I wanted them to, or I just didn't like them, you know, my own personal preferences. But I think this is what the first book lands in. And that is Realm Breaker by Victoria Aveyard. This book is her new high fantasy series. She wrote the Red Queen series a few years ago, like became massively popular. I still have to read the last book. I haven't read it yet. But yeah, that series became massively popular. It's like one of the staples for like early 2014 YA. And of course I enjoyed it when I read it. It's been a while. It was a fun series though. But this one I was really excited for because it was a new book from Victoria Aveyard, and I had enjoyed Red Queen like to a certain extent. But this one was so much more high fantasy than I was expecting it to be. Honestly, I can't even remember what this book is about. I ended up giving it 2 stars. Pretty much all the books I'm talking about here are 2 stars. I don't know, it's weird that I don't really rate books 1 stars, but I've given a lot of 2 stars this year. But yeah, again, I don't really know what this book is about. I don't know why, it's just, I have been reading so much like non-high fantasy for so long. I feel like super high fantasy is something that I don't really read anymore. I used to read a lot of, like with Sarah J Maas, and just when I was younger, I used to read a lot more high fantasy, but I feel like it had been so long that I wasn't expecting it to be like as dense as it was, at least for me, because of course with a new high fantasy world there has to be a lot of world building and a lot of describing what the world is so that the reader can understand the world that the characters are in. And I just wasn't ready for all that world building. I think I've been reading urban fantasy for too long now, but yeah, just for me it was just something that I wasn't expecting. Or not even that I was expecting, because I knew this was a high fantasy novel, but just, I don't know, it just didn't connect with me because I wasn't in the right mindset, I guess, for high fantasy. But I definitely would consider maybe picking it up again in the future with like a new mindset, knowing what this book like has and what it's about. But yeah, this ended up being on the worst books of the year. It was a little bit of a miss for me. The next book is a book that I think I got from the library because I don't own a copy, and that is An Emotion of Great Delight by Tahirareads. This one I was also really excited for because I had read A Very Large Expanse of Sea. I have read Shatter Me, at least like the first 3 books, a very long time ago, and I thought it was just okay. But A Very Large Expanse of Sea I had enjoyed when it had come out, so I was interested and excited to see what she was coming out next with in the contemporary genre. This one was a story about this girl named Shadi, and I think it's like, it's about her like family is falling apart, and she's kind of dealing with all of this in her daily life. And that is what I would describe this book the most, is that it is just her life. Like, it's just a slice, a very small slice of her very dark and tumultuous life. It's not like, there's not really a big overarching plot that's like the focus of the story. The focus of the story is very much the characters. But the reason that I didn't like this book was that it was a little bit too like slice of life for me. I wanted a little bit more plot and a little bit more conflict with some other outside character that's like the focus of the story. This one was just her thoughts, and even like she does meet some guy, but the main focus of the story is just her life and how she's dealing with it in this moment in time. There were also some like weird Islamophobic conversations, like she was talking about the niqab, which is like the face covering, with this guy, and she's like talking about how it's weird and stuff, which I thought was a little bit unnecessary to add. But yeah, I just wanted a little bit more plot to the story. I guess it's just another case of like, this isn't what I was expecting. I was expecting something different, and I didn't really like what was given to me. The next book on this list is a very, very popular book by a very popular author, and my sister loves this author. She's already hating me for including this book in this video, but that is November 9 by Colleen Hoover. Colleen Hoover is an author, like I have another book of hers on my list, but she's very popular. She's known for writing like not exactly romance books. For some reason her books are categorized as romance, even though I would say they're not really romance. There is a big romantic element to these stories, but I think there's usually some sort of twist or some sort of like bigger conversation that's being had in her books. So this book is about a girl named Fallon, and she basically is moving across the country, and she meets this guy named Ben, and then they decide to meet up every single year on November 9th and kind of just like have their relationship for that one day, and then they separate and go back to like where they're from, where they're living. And it's basically about like these several Novembers over the years of them meeting up, and then some like, there's obviously twists and turns because it's a Colleen Hoover book. This one was very interesting. I hate the way that Colleen Hoover wrote Ben, the main character, because he's supposed to be like, he was just such an asshole. Like, I don't know, whenever he saw her for the first time, he like, the first thought in his head was like, what color was her underwear, and like thoughts about her boobs and things like that. And then later on there was like some questionable non-consensual questionable like sex and things of that nature going on, where it was like a little bit iffy because she wasn't fully consenting to her touching her, or to him touching her, and he was still doing it. It was just kind of icky. Yeah, I just did not like the main character Ben at all. I just couldn't really read his scenes. I hated the way he acted and his personality and just like the actions that he did towards the main character. And then the twist in the story is just completely insane. It's just, again, it just adds to his ickiness as a character. Basically, my biggest gripe with this book is the character Ben, and like the way that he like acts and certain events that play out. It's just, I hate it, and it just gives me an icky feeling. So yeah, this is why this is on my worst books of the year list. My sister loves this book though, and she hates me for putting this on this list, but I gotta put it on the worst books. It's no for me. The next book on this list is also another book I got from the library, and that is Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. This one I was super excited for because I'd heard so many things about it over the years. It's a short story collection. All of them are by Carmen Maria Machado, and all these stories are supposed to be like feminist novellas. They're like little stories talking about different women's experiences. And this premise sounded like super interesting to me, and I was so excited to read it. But it just was so metaphorical that it flew over my head. Like, most of it was just in one ear and out the other type of thing. I don't know, like I feel like some of those things could be much more communicated directly, like in a more straightforward way. But there were so many like metaphors and just, I don't know, just like an indirect way of saying things that I feel like I was just dumb. I felt dumb reading it because I felt like I couldn't really understand what the point she was trying to make was and how she was communicating it. It just wasn't working for me. And I was super sad about this one because I was looking forward to it so much, and I had heard so many good things like for the past few years, and it was always a book that was on my radar. And I'm really sad that it turned out to be such a disappointment for me, but I think the premise was still interesting, just the way it was executed was just not for me at all. I do want to try her other books. I have heard so many great things about In the Dream House as well, which is I think like an autobiographical memoir. But if that writing, like someone has to tell me if that writing is like similar to this one, because if it is, I'm probably not gonna like it, just because like I just can't understand it. Like I feel like I'm too dumb to understand it, and I just won't. But yeah, this is a book that I'm sad to be putting on this list, but it has to be one of my worst books of the year. This is another book that I've heard a lot of really good things about. The only reason I'm putting it on this list is because I, for some reason, just wasn't connecting with it throughout the story, and that is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. This one is supposed to be a horror novel about these 4 Indian men, by Indian I mean Native American men, who are kind of like escaping this tragic, like disturbing event that happened in their youths, and it's like a story about that. Overall, I ended up liking it like a little bit more towards the end, but I don't know, for some reason throughout the book I felt like I was super distracted while reading it. I don't know what point in my life it was when I was reading this book, but I just remember that I just couldn't really grasp what was happening and just couldn't really connect with any of the characters or any of the events that were happening in the book. Again, this might be one of the books that I might pick up in the future and end up really enjoying, and if again be in a better headspace to read it. But yeah, this first time around I'm gonna have to put it on my worst books of the year list, because personally, it was just not a great reading experience for me. I wasn't fully into the book as much as I wanted to, and that just kind of hindered my experience reading it. So there is another Colleen Hoover book that I have on this list, and my sister's even more mad at me for putting this one, because I think this is one of her favorites of Colleen Hoover's, and that is Hopeless. I feel like this is a book that's not really talked about when talking about Colleen Hoover, because it's like November 9 and Verity and Ugly Love and It Ends With Us. Those are usually the books that are being talked about when it comes to Colleen Hoover. But the only reason I picked it up is because my sister had it, and I was like, okay, might as well just try it out, because my sister loves it so much. So I just decided to try it. Again, it's just, I honestly can't even remember what happens in this book. I think I remember like the end twist that happened, but I don't know. It's just, again, Colleen Hoover. I think the story just fell a little bit flat for me. The ending was, I guess it was kind of like twisty, I guess, I don't know. But again, I just don't like how Colleen Hoover writes her main characters. I've only read It Ends With Us and November 9 and Hopeless, but I don't know, I just for some reason don't like how she writes her characters. They're just all so annoying, and the guys are always like horrible and they're assholes, and they're just like annoying characters, and their thoughts are just like immature teenage thoughts of like underwear and boobs, and I just don't like that. Will I keep reading Colleen Hoover? Probably, just because for the fun of it. I feel like it's just entertaining to read bad books sometimes. But yeah, this one definitely has to go on my worst books. I don't know, just Colleen Hoover is just, I did like It Ends With Us a little bit more, but I don't know, I think Colleen Hoover as an author is just someone I probably just won't end up fully enjoying. But it's just fun to read her books in the meantime as like hate reading. And the last book is probably the most boring book out of all of these for you to watch, because it's not really a YA book. It's actually a book I read as a part of my sociology class this semester. It's called iGen by Jean M. Twenge, I think. That's how you say her last name. But this one I read for my sociology class. It talks about iGen, which is like it's basically Generation Z, from like the mid-90s to like the early 2000s, which I fall under, and it's supposed to talk about like their characteristics of like the entire generation, and just like what the generation is like. I give this 2 stars because this one was just, I feel like it didn't encapsulate what Generation Z or iGen is like, because like she was bringing up all these like issues or like characteristics that iGen has, like negative characteristics, but then she kept like bringing it back to like our phones, and she was basically like, her advice for us was like, just put down the phone and you guys will be okay. Like, I feel like that is just not good advice, And then she like brought up all these conversations about how we're insecure about the future and the economy and things like that, but there was no nuance to it because like, again, it's because of the economic climate. Like, we're in a recession right now. Like, it's not just that we're insecure, it's just that like there's reasons outside of our control that's causing us to be insecure about these issues. But yeah, I felt like it was not a good representation. Maybe I'm biased because like I'm part of the generation that she's talking about. But yeah, I did not like some of the conversations because they weren't really nuanced at all. And she has a lot of data to like back up what she's saying, but then at some point she doesn't have enough data. It's just kind of a mess sometimes, and I didn't really like reading it. Anyways, those are all the books that I have on my worst books of the year list. I hope that next year I have more books that I like and not as many 2 stars like compared to as like the proportion. I hope the proportion of like low rated books to my total books is like lower than this year, because this year was almost 25% of the books I read is 2 stars, which I don't like that. That's a big amount, and that's never really happened to me because I'm so used to rating everything so highly. And I used to rate everything 5 stars, 4 stars. But now I'm trying to be a little bit more critical, which I guess is why this is happening. But again, no one wants to be reading that many bad books, like compared to their overall books. Anyways, I'm gonna stop talking. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know what your worst book of the year is, as of course I would love to know. But that is for this video. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye!